Hello, everybody. Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Nationals podcast. We are recording this on June 2nd. You will hear this on June 3rd, 2022. I am your host, Josh Neighbors. Joining us today, it is Matt Weyrich. I almost said Max. Matt Weyrich of NBC Sports Washington. We'll talk about Luis Garcia and expectations for him now with the Nationals. Also, Nationals in a bit of a bind with their starting pitching after it's been revealed. Joe Ross will be done for the year, even though he wasn't there yet. He was in the plans. Discuss what the Nats will do now. That and a whole lot more coming up on today's show.
You are Locked On Nationals, your daily Washington Nationals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Once again, hello everybody. Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Nationals podcast. Make sure you find us wherever you guys get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Matt Weyrich, NBC Sports Washington. Matt, pretty eventful time for the Nationals, despite the fact that they're playing really poorly. Still, there's a ton of news, isn't there?
Yeah, the kind of almost gets lost that they were just swept pretty handily by the Mets this week, considering all of the call-ups that we're seeing, injury reports, progress on some injury fronts. I mean, there's a lot going on in Nationals world right now, and a lot of it good. Just the product itself, not so much.
Yeah, so let's talk about the first piece of news here is Joe Ross being done for the season. And, they just DFA'd Aaron Sanchez, right? So Evan Lee is there. Now he's taken that spot. We think Steven Strasburg is going to be back. I mean, what are you hearing on timeline for him to come back to the major leagues? What are you thinking right now?
Yeah, well, he has got a rehab start in AAA Rochester on Friday. That'll be today for those of you listening. And it's going to kind of depend on how he feels coming out of this start. He's ramped up his pitch count up into the high 60s. I expect him to get up into the 80s in this start here. He's going against tougher competition than he's faced his last two outings, having been in low A Fredericksburg for his first two rehab starts. So we'll see how he does in this rehab start, and more importantly, how he feels the next day. And that's going to determine if he's going to need another rehab start or if he could rejoin the Nationals rotation as soon as June 8th, which would be his normal turn in the rotation. So we'll see if that is going to happen. It's all going to depend on how he feels.
At that point, your rotation would be Strasburg, Corbin, Adone, Gray, Fetty. That would be your five at that point. And obviously we get the news that Joe Ross not going to have a chance to push into that rotation. And, I thought Joe pitched pretty well last year a lot of times, Matt. I think I've heard a couple people say, it's going to be tough for him to land on the team because it's second TJ, but he's still 29, so he'll be 30 next year. I still think somebody takes a shot on him in his recovery. I think he's got the potential to be just a solid pitcher, and I've seen guys come back from multiple TJs before. It's not like it's, a death sentence, but I did feel really bad for him. I mean, what a really unfortunate situation for a guy who, I thought sitting out 2020 for a second kind of looked like a good move for him. Feels less and less so right now. He's missed 2 of the last 3 seasons. And obviously had last year cut short due to injury. And this year we're not going to see him.
Yeah, I think best case scenario for Ross is signing a 2-year deal with a major league club to spend most of next season rehabbing, make a few starts, and then have his first full season back. That would be 2024. But all in all likelihood, he's probably going to have to settle for a minor league deal. Davey Martinez did talk about when he announced that Ross would be having the surgery that he wants him back. The Nationals want him back. They see him as a National. They want him to spend time with the team while he's rehabbing. So it seems like the club still supports him, still wants to see through these injuries and get what comes out on the other side. But, that's going to be something where time will tell. But if it is a minor league deal, if that's what he ends up having to settle for, I can't see the Nationals walking away from that, saying that's too much. They've invested a lot in Ross previously. I'm sure that they would want to bring him back if he's willing to sign a minor league deal.
And the other part of this that we have to mention now is that, I'm not sure where Anibal Sanchez is in his recovery, but this means that Yohan Adone is going to remain in the rotation, right? I mean, the two guys that we were thinking before were going to be the guys that were the odd men out were going to be Sanchez and then Adone. And now Sanchez is gone. They call up Evan Lee. Decent, not a horrible start yesterday, but obviously a straight shot from Double A, not your typical road to the bigs. And so now the Nationals are faced with these tough decisions about which way you go. But to me, I mean, it's not that difficult. I think when if you bring Sanchez back, you're going to drop Adone. He seems the guy who's just not totally ready there. But for right now, he gets to kind of retain his spot because he's not the next guy in the pecking order, in my opinion. Now, if Evan Lee pitches pretty well next start, I mean, we'll see. Maybe you make that change, but right now it looks like Yohan Adone at the big league level is safe.
Yeah, I think this next start, which it seems like Evan Lee is going to be getting another start in the majors in this next turn of the rotation, that's going to be huge for him to try and make a case that he might belong in the major leagues. I mean, his first start was promising. It wasn't great. He obviously didn't go very deep into the game, but it also wasn't expected that he would go very deep. He only broke 90 pitches in a start once all season up to this point. So he's not really somebody who's giving even minor league teams, 6, 7 innings in a start. So I would expect him to end up back in Double A. Maybe make this next start, and we go from there. Adone retains his spot until Anibal Sanchez is ready, or one of the Nats' promising young arms that have been pitching well. We saw Cade Cavalli put together probably his most dominant start of the year, his last time out. And Cole Henry, it's reported that he was moved up to AAA today. So the two of them are now in Rochester together. They're the Nats' top two pitching prospects, not to mention Jackson Tetriot, who is not on the 40-man roster, but has been in Rochester this year and has actually been one of their better pitchers all season across their entire minor league system. All three of those guys are really knocking on the doors of the major leagues probably in the next month or so. So there is going to be a roster crunch. I do expect Adone to be sent back down to AAA at some point this year. I mean, his numbers aren't really sparkling at all. He's given up a lot of home runs, a lot of walks, really. I believe he leads the major leagues in walks right now. It's something where, he's shown a lot of flashes and you got to be encouraged about what you saw, but he probably needs to go back to the minor leagues at some point. So I don't think the Nationals will hesitate to bring up Anibal Sanchez. And then there's really going to be some tough decisions when it does come down to it with those young guys.
Austin Voth too. The I wouldn't even call it an experiment. Just the experience itself is over now, right? It's over for him. He's been DFA'd. Just really rough year, and you thought maybe at one point they changed the bullpen. Okay, could have been good for him, but never really got any traction. And I think it was a decision that had to be made. I don't think Nats fans take any pleasure, especially in seeing guys that were part of the championship team, who are around for that, go. But I think it was a decision that had to be made.
Yeah, I think he had gotten enough chances to this point. And if you look at his entire body of work, really the whole thing that you were kind of holding on to was a nice string of starts he had in 2019 before a shoulder injury prevented him from pitching in the playoffs. He looked really good there. He looked like a potential piece for the Nationals rotation, but then they gave him 11 starts in 2020. He was in the rotation the entire shortened season. And, he really didn't look good. He got moved to the bullpen last season and went through some spurts where you're like, okay, Austin Voth might be something, but then he would just have these 4 or 5 outings in a row where he's given up 2, 3 runs. And, you can't be doing that if you're a 1 to 2 inning reliever. That's just not going to be a successful model in Major League Baseball. So the Nationals decided to cut bait, and it felt like the most natural move at this point. With where they are in their bullpen, they've got a lot of injured guys, so they were able to kind of give him a little bit more time this year just because they were digging deep into their depth. But now that they are, starting to call some guys up, Carl Edwards Jr. looking like a legitimate weapon for them, things like that. Guys from AAA, Jordan Weems made his first 2 appearances over this past week. I just didn't think that there was much room for Voth at that point.
All right, quick word from our sponsors here on today's show. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at rockauto.com. Go to rockauto.com today. With the ever-increasing number of makes and models for cars, it's now impossible to find what you need at your local chain auto parts store. So with rockauto.com, they got everything you need. Don't spend 30, 50, or even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership. Go to rockauto.com today, a family-run business serving auto parts customers online for 20 years. rockauto.com. Great selection, always low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. That's rockauto.com. All right, so you got the chance, you were teasing this last week, you got the chance to talk to Luis Garcia, and lo and behold, Luis Garcia gets the call up to the big leagues in the place of Alcides Escobar. Now, we're not sure how long it's going to be, right? I mean, Escobar's on the 10-day IL, I believe it is.
Yes.
So we'll see how that comes along. Gets a hit yesterday. Strikes out 3 times yesterday as well. So when you think about Luis Garcia and think about him at the big league level, like what are your thoughts about what are we looking for now? Because this is what his third stint now in the big leagues. And I know he's still a young guy, but I think it's okay for Nationals fans to say, all right, this is the third time around. It's not like this guy is just getting up to the major leagues. He's played a decent amount of games. What should we look for from Luis Garcia? Where do we think we're going to see the improvements?
So unfortunately, I didn't get to talk to Luis.
Oh,
Was
wait.
supposed to this past
Okay.
week, but we got moved back because of some logistical things, and then the Escobar injury happened, and he just got called up, so it kind of cut it
Right.
short right there. So I didn't get to talk to him, but did talk to his manager Matt LeCroy and teammate Trace Barrera about what they've seen from him this year. And the big thing seems to be that there's more focus coming out of Luis Garcia now. It's not so much I'm a kid just trying to have fun, doing what I can. One thing that LeCroy pointed to was the fact that he stretches a lot now. When he was a 19-year-old, LeCroy managed him back in Double A, and Garcia didn't really care too much about stretching because he was just athletic enough, to not really need it. But now he kind of takes the time to take care of his body, takes the time to prepare for games, for at bats, for individual moments to make better decisions. And so that's been the big thing that they've really harped on. The Nationals have talked about how they wanted him to work on his defense, and he worked with the Nationals' newly created position, their infield coordinator at AAA Rochester, one of the many new positions that they added in their player development staff this year. They spent a lot of time working with Garcia at shortstop, and he went 26 games without an error at one point. Really seemed to have more fundamentally sound defense. So I'm honestly more interested in seeing how he does defensively, because that's what the Nationals have talked so much about as what he needs to improve. But at the plate, he showed a lot more plate discipline in AAA than maybe we have seen in years past. And that's kind of, if that's for real, the 3 strikeouts that he had in that first game yesterday are a little bit uncharacteristic. That's not something we're necessarily going to see should his AAA results carry over to the major leagues. So for him, I would look to see him being patient at the plate, taking those pitches that are just outside, not trying to force the moment because he's still only 22 years old, got up to the majors really early, and that can, really, really affect a player. And Lee Corey mentioned that as well. So, I think it's something where, now he's in the majors. How does he settle in? Does he still hit and take the same approach that he did in AAA and not let the moment get too big for him? Those are going to be the biggest things I'm looking for.
So for him this year in 42 games in AAA, 175 ABs, 32 RBIs, 8 homers, 34 Ks, 16 walks, 314 average, 368 on base, 531 slugging, 899 OPS. So yeah, I mean the hitting stuff, like I think a lot of that comes right with age and just discipline at the plate. So does but you and I have talked about this. Like the defensive stuff is purely reps. It really is reps, and it's not just like the physical reps. It's like just the learning the angles, right? If I catch a ball right here, on a double play feed, how do I recreate basically the best motion? Almost like a shooter, right? If I'm stepping over my, whatever foot, how do I make sure I make this throw? It's that stuff, because you and I have talked about it too. Like, the guy can make plays from his tailbone, right? But also can botch some routine grounders. So I think you're right with that. I think the hitting part of it though is like strikeouts, right? I'm really watching to see, like, can you really, try to, not strike out as much, and maybe, once again, like play discipline, see more pitches. In, let's see, 37 games last year, he walked 15 times. 42 this year, he's walked 16 times. So, like, not we're awful, but this is, not great. That discipline, right? That, we appreciate Yadiel Hernandez. We like the guy towards the back end of the lineup who is aggressive. But maybe for this guy at his age, it's not really where you want to be, right? You want to become a more complete hitter.
Oh, exactly. And Garcia has, a 12-year difference between him and Yadiel Hernandez. So there's plenty of room for development there. The Nationals certainly believe in him, and they're going to have him for an extra year by keeping him down in the minor leagues through what was June 1st. They were able to add an extra year of control through team 2027, as he's not able to accrue enough service time this year for it to count as a full season. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. He'll be 27 at that point. Nationals called him up really early, and that's something that they've never shied away from is worrying down the line. If a guy is ready to come up and contribute to our team now, we'll call him up. They did it with Garcia, they did it with Soto, they did it with Harper, they did it with Trey Turner. There's plenty of examples you can point to of guys that maybe they could have waited to get extra service time, but they didn't. This time, however, with the Nationals being in a rebuild, it makes sense. This year of team control really isn't as valuable as 2027 might be. So maybe they really did want him to work on his defense, and that was the reason that he was down there for so long. But certainly it helped them in gaining that extra year of control, and that's not to be overlooked.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. That's huge, and we all have had that conversation about service time manipulation. And I'll tell you what, it came at the perfect time. I mean, the injury, comes at a time where it's like they just get that cutoff line, right? I mean, it was literally May 31st when they had the injury to Alcides Escobar and have to make the switch. Then, one more word from our sponsors. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Blue Nile. You all know the deal, guys. Blue Nile. If you're looking for a great piece of jewelry for that special someone, go to Blue Nile today. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Sports listeners get a $50 off coupon on a purchase of $500 or more. This is a podcast exclusive. Use code Locked On. That's LOCKEDON. Locked On. You guys will get that $50 off once again at BlueNile.com. Promo code Locked On. Yeah, and then the one other thing, I mean, that just continually heats up, Matt, is we'll touch on this and we'll wrap it for this, but like the Juan Soto trade stuff, right? I mean, it just doesn't go away. But Mike Rizzo came and talked about it yesterday. I believe it was on the Junkies. I think did his radio hit that he does, and I think with the team, we've mentioned this before, with a team in flux potentially being sold, you want to maintain control of that asset and give the next group something to do. I know it's a fun thing to talk about. We did the Juan Soto trade package stuff too on this show. All right. But you always need to put the caveat, like they're not shopping him. And I don't think people understand that. They are not shopping him.
I think anybody who's been following this team over the past 12 months understands that Juan Soto isn't going anywhere. It just doesn't make sense on multiple fronts. They're trying to have a quick rebuild. If you trade Juan Soto, that extends the rebuild to greater than 3 years, which is what they're reportedly looking for. They're in the middle of selling the team. Trading Juan Soto devalues the asset that is the Washington Nationals. There's no way around it. Having Soto being there as a guy to put butts in seats when very few other players are, he is just way more valuable than just what he brings as a baseball player. He is the face of this team, and it's really not even close. And then there's the question of, as I put out on Twitter yesterday, who would want to put their name behind trading Juan Soto? Is it Mike Rizzo in what could be his last year before he potentially goes to another team because his contract might be up after this year? No, probably not. Is it the Lerners who won a World Series in DC and are forever going to have their reputation tied to that? Would they really want to sour the end of it by trading Juan Soto? No, probably not. Would any new owners that come in want their first move to be, as new owners, trading Juan Soto and immediately disenfranchising themselves from the entire fan base? No, probably not. It just really doesn't make sense any way you look at it, unless the Nationals just wanted to go complete reboot, bring in a new GM, bring in a new manager, trade Juan Soto, get a host of prospects, and just tear this whole thing down to the studs. But with the improvement that they've seen in their farm system this year alone, I really don't think that it makes any sense to try to kick this longer down the road. They seem to be progressing well in their rebuild right now. And if I'm Mike Rizzo and the Lerners, I feel confident in the direction of the team.
And the ownership just, they get off. I mean, they're kind of off the hook for the Bryce thing, right? Like you're kind of off the hook for that because you want a title. If you let one go, you're going to be kind of back on the hook for that in a way. It's like, sure, you won the title, but you let these two guys walk.
Not to mention Trey and Rendon.
Right. Not to mention those guys either. So, I'm with you on this. Matt, what are you working on right now? Where can people find your work and all of its variety?
Yeah, I'm working on a lot of baseball stuff, cooking up a few things this upcoming week. I won't give too much away, but you can check all of my work out over at NBCSportsWashington.com. And I'm on Twitter @ByMattWeirick.
All right, cool. You guys can find me on Twitter at JoshNeighbors_. You guys can find the show at LO_Nationals. You guys can find us wherever you get your podcasts, and you can find us on YouTube as well. All right, Matt, enjoy the Clash of the Titans between Cincinnati and the Nats this weekend.
The race to the bottom, baby.